someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on CareGiverSolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info. I'm so glad you could join us today. We have another wonderful program. This show is for you, the family caregiver. So if you're caring for someone with memory loss, we talk about that. We talk about dementia, different kinds of dementia, and caregiving, and how difficult it is. But hopefully, through this educational resource, you'll find some good advice and some tips to help you along your journey. Today, we're going to be talking about moving a loved one with memory loss out of their home. And that's a very, very difficult subject for caregivers to even think about, let alone actually do. Now, when someone has memory loss and they're in their home, it's usually the family that has to make that determination that it's no longer safe, or for other reasons why that person should no longer continue to live at home. And it's not easy to execute even a plan that you have. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot to consider, and getting even to the decision of moving a loved one out of the home is very difficult. There's this wonderful resource. It's called Moving a Relative with Memory Loss. It's called A Family Caregiver Guide to that. And it was written by Lori White and Beth Spencer. And this is a great guide that explains all of this information and tells you what you should consider when making that decision. Now, there's lots of reasons why people will eventually move out of their home. It's not made by the person with the dementia, because obviously they don't have the capacity to assess their situation. Even if they're higher functioning, sometimes their ability to reason and figure things out is very impaired, or they're in denial that there's even anything wrong with them in the first place. But according to this book, I would like to just read to you, so give you an idea of some of the most common reasons that someone would be attempting to move out of their home at a particular point in time. So here we go. The amount of supervision and assistance needed by the relative with memory loss is too exhausting for the caregiver. Family members are not able to provide the necessary level of care due to family disagreements or geographic distances. The person with memory loss is no longer safe in his or her current residence. The caregiver is unable to keep up with both family and work responsibilities. Emergency and crisis situations for the caregiver or the person with memory loss have arisen. Illness or injury to the person with memory loss, another reason. The current level of services is not enough, is too expensive, or is too difficult to arrange and sustain. And lastly, the person with memory loss no longer recognizes her home or family. So there's just several of the reasons that may prompt someone to have to make that decision to move. Now, we're going to be meeting today a caregiver, and she's going to be sharing her story and what prompted her to have to move her loved one out of her home, but not just out of her home, out of state, which is a very traumatic circumstances in many cases. And so we're going to be talking to her of why she made that decision, what helped her make that decision, and what she did about it and how it went. So stay tuned for that. We're going to come up in just a minute. But before I introduce her, I want to let you know that I appreciate you all tuning in, calling in for the book. Later in this broadcast, we will be offering free books, including the guide that I just mentioned to you, plus the famous 36-hour day that we always offer as a free resource on this show. So we are live from Boca Raton, Florida, and I hope you're listening to us safely in your car or at home on the local South Florida radio. But if you're out of our area, of our listening area, you can join us via the internet on the website CareGiverSolutions.info. Another way to tune in, and we have people, many people out of state and out of the area that tune in and watch us every week. So we're every Tuesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that being said, if you want to catch us, just tune in, log on, and we'll be there providing lots of information for you. You can also watch previous broadcasts on the internet, that same website, caregiversolutions.info. So we have archive shows there. So if you like what you hear and you want to hear other topics, there's plenty to choose from. So it's my pleasure right now to introduce to you Lynn, and Lynn is a caregiver. And hi, Lynn.
Hi, Marcia.
Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you're a caregiver.
Yes.
And you care for a person, not really a blood relative, but in your words, a second mom.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a whole big deal because you recently moved not only your loved one, your pseudo mom, to South Florida from another state, but you yourself moved too.
Correct.
So let's get back to the beginning of the details. And
Sure.
I'm just curious, right off the bat, is how did you become a caregiver? Because I know that you're in your past life, you were a children's minister or a youth pastor, right?
Yes,
For children.
Yes.
And how all of a sudden are you thrust into a caregiver role?
Okay. Well, it started off where I was the youth minister at our church, and Barb was a member of the church, and I needed a place to live, and Barb and her husband at the time offered their house, a room for me to live in, and that's how I got to know Barb and her family. And so Barb and I became best friends, and she became kind of like a second mom to me. So we were very close. And then down the line, so for many years, it was like 20-something years. I was living in the same household as Barb and started seeing different signs coming from Barb that something was going on with her memory. And the first one that I can remember was she got lost driving.
Okay, that's usually one of the first signs.
Yes. So she was running a quick errand to in town, which she had done many a times, and got lost. And so that was the first sign.
That must have scared her.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Thank goodness she had her phone with her, a cell phone, so she could call me because I was getting worried that she wasn't coming back in the short time she should have been.
So that was one of the first clues. So something was wrong.
Yes, yes.
So tell me, her name is Barb,
Her name is
obviously.
Barb, yes.
And so tell me, what kind of person is Barb? A little bit about her personality.
Very outgoing, very much an extrovert, loved people, loved being around people. She just lit up when she was in an environment of people. And she was always, star of the show kind of thing whenever she was in gatherings and stuff. And everyone loved her too. And she was just kind-hearted. She did choir in church, and everyone in choir just loved her, and she was just a very giving person.
Well, those are good qualities for anybody, but you were lucky to have such a good friend
Yes.
and a mentor, and then
Yes.
becoming now someone who she relied on you.
Yes.
And so as time went on, were there other little signs besides the driving, or was that something that just in and of itself prompted the family to take her to a doctor, or did you wait and see what else may have been going on?
A few other things at choir. I was having difficulty following the music, and the choir director would let me know. And then I was concerned about her driving at night, and did not want her doing that. So I started taking her to choir. But it was just those little things. It's like she just had a hard time following, doing things. And it got to the point where she loved to cook, and it was getting harder and harder to cook, to follow a recipe, to understand a recipe. So it was those kind of things. I did take her to, her doctor, and had her doing a memory test that they give to people. And they said, yes, she had mild cognitive impairment.
Which is the precursor to
right.
Alzheimer's.
Right. So they said that was true. And so we just kind of as time went on, I just kind of watched her and just saw, since I was living with her, it was easy to just see these little things. And then finally got to the point where it was hard leaving her alone. And I was putting her in daycare because I was working during the day. So I would put her in daycare. So at least I knew that she was in a safe place.
So you became her guardian angel, too.
Yes.
Yes. And how did Barb accept this change in her? Because being such a social person and being outgoing, was she accepting of what the doctor's diagnosis was? No.
No, not at all.
No?
No, not at all. She was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. And in fact, when I had a hard time kind of convincing her to go to the daycare, and I says, I don't need to go there. And I said, no, they need you to help them. So I kind of put it as, you're going to be a helper there for them. And she was okay with that.
Okay, that's very good. So at this time, you're living in what state?
Maryland.
In Maryland, okay.
So that's where I met Barb. Yes.
Okay, so you're living in Maryland, and we're going to go to our first quick commercial break to see what happens next with Lynn and Barb. So we'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Hi. The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who
8-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And welcome back. My guest today is Lynn, and Lynn is a caregiver for a loved one, someone like her mother. So we'll call her a pseudo mother.
Yes.
For many, many years. And so you're telling me that Lynn, you went to the doctor, and the doctor, she said, had mild cognitive impairment.
Correct.
And you're living in Maryland, and so now you're watching her more and more and more because she needs the supervision. And you took her to the daycare center, but then you had to make a first move, and you're living in Maryland at this time.
Correct.
What was the first move you had to make, and why did you make it?
It got to the point where it was just so hard for me to be working and being there that I felt it was time to that she needed a full-time caregiver. And so I talked to the family and mentioned to them that I felt like Barbara's not from Maryland, she's from Indiana. And I felt that it was important that while she still had a memory, that she did recognize people, that she should go to Indiana, where her family is, where she had relatives.
There and
she has children and siblings there. So that was what I decided to do. And speaking with the family and knowing the family, no one was going to step up to do that, to be, take care of Barb. And I did not want to, I felt like I did not want her to go into a facility, and that I was able to take on that responsibility of being her full-time caregiver.
At that time, too, with the mild cognitive impairment, she wasn't too advanced yet.
Exactly.
And so maybe she wasn't time, for her to go into a memory care, but still people that don't need to go in yet because they are high functioning and everything else being equal, they're fine, but still they need that supervision, right?
Absolutely.
And they need someone to oversee.
She couldn't be by herself.
So then it just defaulted to you.
Yes.
And you became her full-time caregiver.
Yes, and I took on that responsibility. And it was challenging, not just with Barb, because she was so high functioning that she saw what things were going on, and I had to do a lot of decluttering for the move and to Indiana and make all those arrangements. So I actually hired a declutterer to help me with that, and it was challenging in the sense of she didn't want to see things leaving her house.
Yeah, of course.
Such.
And was she in denial that she needed to move, even though it was going to be closer to her siblings and her children?
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
definitely.
Did she resist that and give you a hard time?
She did. Definitely did. So, yes, because she's still feeling like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. Why are you doing this?
Right. And how did you, counter that?
I just, I'm not even sure how I did it. I would just talk to her about, this is going to be really good. Don't you want to be close to your family? Because she was so far away. I said, I think it's a really good idea. She had grandchildren there in Indiana. And like I said, her son and his family and siblings. So I just kept on saying.
Okay. So at that point, you could still reason with her a little bit and she'd listen to you.
Yes.
So did it turn out to be a good move to be closer to the family?
Yes.
Okay. So no regrets there.
No regrets there.
Okay. Then she's in Indiana with you for so long.
Yep.
And of course, because she had mild cognitive impairment, you continued to take her to the doctor. And what happened when you went to the doctor after a while?
Well, I've been calling it dementia, that Barb's got dementia, but no one ever said Alzheimer's. And so I actually had to ask the doctor. I said, does Barb have Alzheimer's? And he said, oh, yes, she does. But I had to get it out of him. I mean, it wasn't stated.
So he never actually came out and told you. And that's very, very important. And, I'm glad that you came out and asked him, because a lot of doctors throw out that term, kind of loosely. Mild cognitive impairment is one thing, and it can lead to dementia. Not always, but it can. Right. But then they use that term dementia, which doesn't really tell you much of anything, because a lot of things can cause dementia. So to pinpoint it is very important, because at least then now you know what you're dealing with. Right. And he confirmed to you that it was true Alzheimer's.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
So at this point in the stage where you finally got it confirmed, Barb was in her 70s maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
Her late 70s, yes.
And obviously she has declined. So life is going on. You're a caregiver.
Yep. So that's 4 years. So we spent 4 years in Indiana.
Okay.
And I was there living with Barb. We were renting a house, and so I was her full-time caregiver.
So had you had any experience prior to being thrust in this role of caregiving with dementia or any Alzheimer's or anything else?
Not at all.
As a caregiver?
No, not at all.
So
No.
how did you cope as Barb progressed, because you were there to see the progression? How did you cope? How did you know what to do?
Boy, lots of prayers. I went into it just kind of like learning on the job training, and that's what I did. And I have to say, Marcia, that I always considered myself a very patient person. But boy, I tell you, being a full-time caregiver really tries your patience.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes, from the horse's mouth.
I was surprised at myself how I was becoming less patient and very frustrated with everything, and with dealing with Barb, and how to deal with Barb, and what is the best. Am I doing this correctly? Am I doing the best for her? Because I'm just thinking of her. I mean, I'm thinking of, and keeping her comfortable and all.
Right. So you surprised yourself
Yes.
of the feelings that were bubbling up in you doing this new job, because it
Yes.
is a job.
Yes.
I mean, it's a job.
Yes.
It's a full-time
Full-time
job now for you.
Yes.
And how do you deal with things? And, you question yourself, is this right? Is this wrong?
Yep.
And, and it's hard because it's very stressful, and
Yes.
it's hard to deal with that. So
Absolutely.
so were you, all of a sudden, was there a point in time where you thought, maybe I'm not cut out for this? Maybe I can't do this? Maybe I shouldn't do this? What were you thinking?
No, I felt pretty confident I could, but I knew that I could use some help. And that was the hardest thing for me to accept, that I was feeling like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And people around me and friends of Barb's and the family were saying, Lynn, you need some help. You really need some help. And I guess the trigger point on that one was Barb had a fall and broke her hip. And that was a whole new thing that caused me to see that when she got back from doing rehab from her fall, and that I needed some help. And so that's when I called in Home Instead.
Okay, a home health company to come in and assist you.
Exactly. To help me, because it was getting to the point where the family and stuff says, you need a break, Lynn, and that would be really
Yeah,
good.
because you're 24/7.
Yes.
Just you.
Yes.
And we tell all of our caregivers, that famous quote from Dr. Murray Todd, who's a very well-known neurologist here in South Florida. It takes a village, and one person can't do it all the time.
Yes.
And he used to say that it takes 3 people to take care of one person with Alzheimer's. And
Wow.
so you realized it,
Yes.
unfortunately, after a mishap, not your fault, but things happen and things change. So you always, it's always evolving, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I have to say, Marcia, that I don't regret moving to Indiana and bringing Barb to Indiana, but I guess this can be a common occurrence that the family didn't step up like I had thought. And
Okay, and that was the reason I said, was it a good thing to move to another location close to family? Because you would hope or sometimes expect the family to step up to the plate, be there. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, not at all.
Families are busy. They have their own lives. They have their own children and grandchildren and
Absolutely.
dogs and pets and houses and jobs, and everybody's so busy.
absolutely. And that's what it was. And also, Marcia, I was, I've been with Barb through all of this progression of her dementia / Alzheimer's. And I think it was hard for the family when we moved there, is
To
for
see
them to see Barb the way she was, that she wasn't the Barb, the sister, the grandmother, the friend,
So they
whatever.
couldn't embrace that
Yes,
as
that was
the person
very
that they
difficult.
used
Yes.
to know.
Yes.
And they didn't know how to deal with the new Barb.
Right, because they didn't see her that often. And so just kind of hitting them with that. So that was, that was hard.
Yeah, I can see that. So that was Indiana, but now you're in South Florida. So how did you come to Florida? Because you heard earlier before I introduced you, the most common reasons that I read from this wonderful guide of what might prompt someone to have to move their loved one out of their home.
Right.
And not only did you move her out of her home in Indiana, you moved her out of her home to Florida. So were any of those reasons your reasons? Tell me what prompted this move.
Okay. So 4 years in Indiana, being Barb's full-time caregiver. And during this time, my dear mother, who lives in Delray Beach, Florida here, has said to me, Lynn, when you feel like this is going to be too much for you to be a full-time caregiver, I would love for you to come to Florida and live with me. So
now you've got Mom,
right,
thousands of miles away, kind of tugging at your heartstrings. Correct. Because she's elderly herself, lived by herself.
Correct.
And now she's wanting some of your time and attention. And now you're divided. You've
Correct.
got two moms, basically, that need your help. So you must have been in quite a pickle.
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
It was quite a dilemma. It was really challenging to me because I was feeling like it was getting harder and harder with Barb. She was progressing. And it was hard, and because I didn't want to leave Barb. And so what happened was I made the decision that if I moved to Florida, I would take Barb with me. And I just told the family flat out, I said, I'm going to move to Florida and move in with my mom, but I'm going to take Barb with me and find a facility down there, a memory care facility that I felt comfortable to put her in.
So at the same time, be closer to your biological mother to be there for her too. Wow. Yeah. So with all of this happening and with the family not really getting too involved or stepping up to the plate as far as caregiving, you not only were her full-time caregiver, but then you ended up actually being her power of attorney at this point
Absolutely.
too. Okay.
Absolutely. So you could not do this without having power of attorney.
Right. So you just wanted to let everybody know that you had the legal right
Absolutely.
to then make those decisions to move her out of state.
Yes.
It wasn't just that you were taking her away from her home and her family, but you were actually giving the power of attorney to make those
Absolutely.
decisions.
And I tell you, Marcia, that their family couldn't have been more supportive of me, because they realized, and this may not always happen in families, that they are so supportive or not supportive, or they have issues with, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? But I have to say that the family was so supportive. They knew that I was the one caring for her, that they really, there was nothing for them to
Yeah, and that is great, because families don't always agree. And actually, one of the reasons that we mentioned earlier was families having disagreements about the care of somebody.
Sure.
But they realized, that you had a great heart and you cared about her, and they embraced that part and probably thought, if it wasn't for you, who would be there for her, because they just couldn't for lots of reasons. And families, sometimes they just can't. I mean, it's just not possible. So
so I was lucky.
You were lucky.
Very
and
lucky.
You were lucky, and they were lucky to have you, and Barb's lucky also to have you as her guardian angel. So I like that reason, because it's really not one on the common list, as we talked about.
Right.
So now you're putting yourself in a better position to not only take care of your pseudo mom, but your own mother as well when she needs it down the road, and spend time with her. So that's great. But we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, Lynn is going to share with us, how did she do this move? She's moving a person with Alzheimer's out of state into a new home and into an assisted living for memory care. How did she do that? Because you just don't pick up and go. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear that story. We'll be right back.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. But it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help,
Info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Welcome back. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. They are located all across the United States in about 50 different locations. We have 10 right here in Florida. And Arden Courts is awesome because they're 100% dedicated to memory care. So not only do they take care of the residents that live there, they also take care of the caregivers. And what I mean by that is they're there for the caregivers, providing a lot of support, hand-holding, literally and figuratively. And one of the things that they would like to do today for you, the family caregiver, is give you this book as a resource. There are lots of books out there. This one has stood the test of time. It's called The 36-Hour Day. And it's a family guide to living with someone with memory loss, dementia, lots of good information, advice, tips, definitions even, just great resource. All you have to do to get this book is call the toll-free number for Arden Courts. Tell them that you heard about the offer on the Caregiver Solutions information show. They will be glad to send it directly to your house. So that number is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. And tell them that you'd like to have this book, and they'll mail it right out to you. If you are living near an Arden Courts, feel free to go in. They have many other resources that they can provide to you. They have a resource library with all kinds of topics related to dementia. And as a matter of fact, if you would like this book, it's a little pamphlet. It's a little soft cover little book. It's called Moving a Relative with Memory Loss. We're actually offering this book also. If you call in and specifically ask for the Moving a Relative with Memory Loss, they'll be happy to also include this book along with the 36-Hour Day. So we're talking about this topic today, and this is a great little guide that you might want if you're considering moving a loved one. So give them a call, and they'll be happy to take care of that for you too. So my guest today is Lynn. She's a caregiver and power of attorney for Barb, who has been under her care for many, many years. And we're talking about moving Barb from her home and to another location closer to family. And now the point has come where Lynn, the caregiver, has made a decision to move to South Florida to not only be near her own mother, but to bring Barb with her, who is like a mother to her, and be there for both of them. So, Lynn, that's a big job, and that's a very admirable thing to do. Were you scared at all about making this move once you made the decision?
Yes and no. It was kind of like you make the decision and you just go with it. I mean, there was no kind of turning back. The situation was in Indiana, we were renting a house. So part of the deal was that our lease was up at a certain time. And so it was a matter of you make the decision when
It's a timing issue.
it's a timing issue.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like, okay, I have to make a decision.
So because you had a deadline,
Yes.
because your lease was up, that was
I had
what
to
you
make a
went with, to
decision.
make the decision
Yes.
and then do what you had to do within that time frame to make it happen.
Correct.
So here you are up in Indiana, moving to South Florida, and obviously you had to find a
Right.
location for Barb to live. So was that hard to do from out of state?
Yes, it was difficult, but thank God my mother was here to give me some guidance. So our lease was up at the end of May. So I started working in the beginning of the year. So in January, after the holidays, I did some research and went online to facilities around Delray Beach because I wanted a facility
Near your
close to
mom.
my mom. So I would email those facilities, their addresses and names to my mom, and she was gracious enough to go and visit.
So your mom was the scout.
Yes, she was.
And so I had the pleasure of actually meeting your mom.
Yes.
And she is delightful, and she is an awesome lady. And she came to visit, and we had a wonderful talk. And she told me about your situation.
Yes.
And I have to say, on air, thank you for choosing Arden Courts for Barb. We're happy that you found, the place that you chose for her because it was going to meet her needs, meet your needs, and it was the best possible choice that you could have made. And
absolutely.
thank you so much for doing that. But that wasn't where it ended, because now that you've made the decision of where, then you've got the whole physical move. So at this point in time now, Barb has been transitioning into a different stage of her Alzheimer's.
Correct.
As we all know, it's progressive.
Yes.
So at this point, when you knew that you were going to be coming to Florida, did you tell Barb what was happening? And if you did, how did you tell her, and what was her reaction?
I tried not to give her too much information. I basically said we're going to go to Florida to visit my mom.
So you kind of made it a little like vacation,
Yes.
temporary.
Absolutely.
And that sounds great. Well, who wouldn't want to go to Florida to visit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think,
Yes.
I just have to say that, you did all of this pretty much from gut instinct because you're not trained. You're not a trained caregiver.
Absolutely.
You didn't go to classes. You didn't, read tons of books. You were just in it. And I have to say that I'm very impressed by you as a caregiver, because your instincts all along have been very, very good. And I just wanted to compliment you. And, I think sometimes caregivers don't hear that enough, because you do doubt yourself, and you do sometimes wonder, am I doing the right thing? And caregivers are very hard on themselves sometimes.
Yeah, it was challenging.
Yeah.
It was challenging. And I just, just like, okay, you make the decision and you just do it.
But the fact that you kept it simple for Barb and didn't elaborate and give her too many details, because number one, someone with Alzheimer's can't comprehend too many details.
Absolutely.
And you told her in such a way that you made it sound like fun. And so who wouldn't want to go along with that, because that's a vacation. And you also, very importantly, told her in a style that she probably understood that it was a temporary thing. And that's really good that you did that, because people with dementia, they get scared.
Yes.
And if you come out and tell them the truth, they get scared because it's a change, and change is scary. Change is scary for anybody, right? I mean, you want to upset someone's apple cart, tell them, hey, tomorrow you're moving to Turkey, right?
People don't do well with change.
And gosh, that would create lots of anxiety in anybody. So especially someone who's older and has dementia, change is really scary. And so you eliminated that anxiety for her by creating a scenario where not only it sounds like it's a good time, but it's going to be temporary. And because of her short-term memory loss, the chances are she's not going to remember, what transpired before that, and kind of go with the flow kind of thing. And is that kind of what happened?
Yes, and I have to say that I know, Marcia, you were my first contact, and then Sonny took over after that. And the constant communication was wonderful, because there was a lot of assurances there about when I have questions, I could just always call, and especially coming. And I was really concerned about getting Barb in and getting her down here in a time to where that worked out.
Yeah, so you're coordinating everything.
I'm coordinating.
And it is important, and thank you, because we do believe that communication is the key. And, it's very important for caregivers to have that contact to get their questions answered, to alleviate their fears. It's very, very important.
Yes.
And what you did was no easy feat. So, having the support of on the other end is invaluable.
And I have to say, there was many times that I questioned myself or felt guilty of
What'd
doing
you feel
this.
guilty about?
About putting her into a facility.
Okay.
I think that just kind of letting go in a sense of, because I was her full-time caregiver, it was kind of like letting go of my child.
Yes. So what did you?
Because Barb was like my
So what
child.
did you worry about now that you've got the ball rolling, and you've made the decision, and she's on the waiting list to get into Arden Courts?
Right.
What did you worry about that would happen once she came? Did you have fears, or did you stay up late at night, like putting scenarios through your head and stressing yourself out?
I think it was just more so just the releasing her from my care, from my full-time care, and just thinking like no one's going to care for her like I can care for her, and that just kind of letting go.
But you know what? No one is going to care for her the way you do, because they can't, because you're one person that's known her for almost 30 years,
Yep.
and you know her inside out, and now you're right, you're giving your baby to somebody else, and that is scary, and you do worry, but it works.
Yep.
You have to give it a chance. You have to work with the person, with the people that are going to be in the care, and keep that communication open so that it is a less stressful and a successful transition. So,
Can I give a little plug here also?
if
Maybe?
you must.
Well, coming from a different state, so you're worrying about what do I do with all this furniture and stuff. And so I wanted to get Barb, I was hoping to get Barb in the early part of May, since I had till the end of May to tie up ends in Indiana with the house. And so what made it nicer for me was that the fact of it's a furnished facility, that I didn't have to worry about if Barb got in, how am I going to get her furniture there? It made the transition that much easier for me, that I didn't have to worry about, that I could just bring Barb in on the plane, get her here, and not having to worry
Go
about
right in,
go right in, and not having to worry about the furniture as it comes.
and that's
stuff.
another thing to consider when people are considering making the move.
yeah.
No, that's just another piece of the whole puzzle.
And
that
you might not
gotta
think about that, but when you're
Yeah. So Arden Courts does supply the furniture for the
Absolutely.
residents,
Yep.
and you don't have to. Matter of fact, they supply the linens and the towels and the
Yes.
soap and the shampoo, and it's almost like going to the Hilton. Whatever you didn't get, we'll find it for you.
going to a hotel,
Yeah,
right.
we'll find it for you.
Yeah.
So overall, would you say that when it was all said and done, was your experience of actually making that move into a community from home with Barb better or worse than you expected?
Oh, much better.
Much better.
Much better. Yes. Everything seemed to flow wonderfully. I have to say that it worked out great getting her down here, the timing, and just like I said, the continuing communication with Arden Courts of when they thought there would be an opening. So it worked out terrifically.
Good.
And the way that Arden Courts transitions the person going in, it's just wonderful.
Well, we're going to talk about that as soon as we come back from our last break, and we're going to find out. We know how Lynn did, right? She had a good experience, better than she expected. Now we're going to find out how Barb did. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney? Perhaps you find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments.
Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. But it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know. We understand. We can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
A care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Thank you for staying with us. And my guest today is Lynn. She's a caregiver and power of attorney for Barb. And we've been talking about the transition of Barb from the time she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's all the way through from her big move. And we're talking about moving a loved one. And of course, Lynn not only moved Barb from home, she moved her from the state of where her home was. And we're talking about how to do that and what you need to do to prepare. And Lynn, you are amazing because you actually made this transition and this move easier for Barb because of the way you handled it. And I again, want to commend you for that. Although you were feeling guilty, although you were a little bit apprehensive, didn't want to let go of your baby, but the day came when it was time to move. And how were you feeling that day when you knew that you had to bring her and leave her in the hands of the capable people, hopefully that you felt that, at Arden Courts? What were you feeling? And can you share that?
Little scared. And there's that sense of being scared, not knowing, I hope I made the right decision, but felt confident enough that this was the right move because of Barb's situation and how she had progressed.
Yes.
That it was getting too challenging for me to be her full-time caregiver.
And then how did Barb react? What was her reaction? How did she seem to accept that? Because I think that's going to be telltale to how you're going to feel once you see what she behaves.
Oh, yeah.
Her behavior, her reaction. So tell me about that.
She was great. I mean, she just like, when I would come to visit her, she would like, oh, you're here. No, she loves it. She just loves it. And her being, Barb is very extrovert person and social and loves being around people. And the stimulation that she gets at Arden Courts, I couldn't have asked for anything better. I mean, and that was a situation where it was just myself and Barb as her full-time caregiver. I knew that I wasn't giving her the stimulation that she really probably needed.
But how could you? Because you're dealing with everything else for her care, and you're taking care of the house and all the duties of the house and the shopping and paying the bills or whatever. Right. I mean, all the little things, and you can't be 100% entertainer for somebody as a sole caregiver.
Yes.
And I think a lot of caregivers put themselves down because, I didn't do enough because they feel like maybe they should, but it's impossible.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I have to say that actually I think Barb's doing better since she's been in Arden Courts, I've seen her be more functioning than she was. She's more talkative. Everyone loves her. She loves everyone. She just goes up to everyone and just says hello and how are you doing?
And she participates
And
in
she
activities.
participates in everything, and she loves to sing, and so there's a lot of singing there, and so she's getting all of that stimulation, and
Which
that's
is very, very
wonderful.
important. Very, very important.
It is.
I mean,
And-
you're nice and you're a good person to be around, but I mean, you can't.
I can't do it all.
You can't entertain. You're not.
Right.
Physically able. I mean, I'm sure your heart is willing, but you're not physically able to do everything. And so, this is what caregivers stress out about. And
Yes.
some caregivers, try to actually become martyrs, by trying to do it all. And then, we know the statistic with a lot of caregivers that if you continue on that path and without getting help,
Yeah.
the
It could be.
statistics say over 60% are going to die before a person that's not a caregiver in the
Absolutely.
same situation.
Absolutely.
with-
There is a high stress level.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
But I mean, I go there every day, just about to Arden Courts and visits with Barb, and I can see how she's happy. She's happy, and she
Do you go every day because you have to or because you want to?
because I want to.
Okay.
Because I want to, and I want keep that communication going between the two of us, and so it's really good. And so I go to all the different events and stuff, and participate with her, and so I can see her with her day-to-day activities, and it's great.
So it does your heart good to see her now flourishing.
Oh yes,
And actually, like you say, better than it was at home because, I
She's
think
getting
home
that
is
stimulation.
Yeah, home
Yes.
is great. And I think home is wonderful for people until it's not.
And- yeah.
And there comes a point in time in a person with dementia's care that home is not the best. And I think, obviously you're testament to
Oh
that.
yeah, absolutely, Marcia. Yep.
So Barb didn't express a lot of the emotions or any emotions that you might expect of someone going into a new environment, because a lot of caregivers are afraid of what if they get angry at me? What if they, don't want me to leave them and they blame me, or they get angry, or they get really sad and they cry, and that's going to make me feel terrible. But she didn't really have those emotions.
No, she didn't. No,
Right.
she just fit right in.
So one of the emotions is excitement, and that's the one that you want to strive for, and that would be the best outcome. But everybody's different, and
Yeah.
I want to stress to caregivers that every person reacts in a different way. It depends on their personality. It depends
Right.
on the stage of the dementia, the Alzheimer's,
Absolutely.
where they're at the
Yes.
time. It depends on a lot of other environmental factors of where they're coming from. So not everybody's the same, but eventually the goal is to transition them so that there is a successful outcome. Sometimes it's immediate, like in Barb's case.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a week. Sometimes it takes a month. Sometimes it takes several months. But the point is to make that transition smooth and easy, to give that person quality of life.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what it's all about, is that quality of life.
and I feel great. I feel great with my move. I feel great with having Barb at Arden Courts, and everything has worked out for the best.
Couldn't ask for more, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you so much for telling us your story today.
Thank you for having me.
You've obviously learned by doing. So in the minute that we have left, do you have any tips for our audience that are listening that maybe they're seeing themselves in your shoes? Anything that you would give them as a tip or two that might be something that they want to consider?
Oh gosh. Just feel confident of your decisions that you make, and obviously share those feelings with the family and all, and just be open about everything
Yeah.
to the family of what the interest of Barb or the person is the bottom line.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Well, thank you for being here and sharing your story. We appreciate it. And I want to thank you all for joining in today and listening. And if you would like to get that book, The 36-Hour Day, or again, would like to get also this pamphlet, it's called Moving a Relative with Memory Loss, a Family Caregiver Guide. Arden Courts is offering for a limited time this book also. So give us a call at 888-478-2410 and get your book, and you can share in the same information as we've been talking today with Lynn about moving a loved one with memory loss. It'll probably answer a lot of your questions, make you feel better, and you don't have to, put yourself through a lot of angst, although it's common. You're going to do it anyway, probably, but you're going to feel better about it, right, Barb? Right. Okay, so, or Lynn, sorry. So thank you for joining us. We will be back same time, same place next week. We want to make sure that you join us because we have another wonderful show for you next week. We've got more to come, and we're here for you. So please take advantage. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell anybody that would benefit from watching the show, listening to us, and I'm sure that they would very much appreciate that. So in the meantime, don't forget, give somebody a hug because they need it, and so do you. We'll see you then. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on CareGiverSolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed on the preceding